Who are you going to call, a hawkish Hillary or a dovish Rand Paul? Let's play hardball. Good evening, I'm Chris Matthews up in New York. Let me start tonight with this wild possibility that we, you and I, may have to choose for our next president between a Democratic hawk and a Republican dove.
If you want to see a transformational election in our country, let the Democrats put forward a war hawk like Hillary Clinton, and you'll see a transformation like you've never seen.
What will this do to mix up the decision? Well, after 3 elections voting against a war pushed by W, we all know, and Cheney, can we choose a Democrat who voted for that war and sounds hawkish even today, who takes a harder line on Putin, on Iran, on Syria? And how will Republicans behave in the voting booth when forced to vote for a Republican, Rand Paul, who thinks the U.S. has been too warlike? All this is possible. All this could happen if 2 things happen. Hillary Clinton sticks to the hard line she voiced in a recent interview with The Atlantic, and Rand Paul wins the Republican nomination. Think it can't happen? It can. The big question is how party line voters will deal with it. Will Democrats get hawkish? Will Republicans get suddenly dovish? Talk about changing partners. David Corn is Washington Bureau Chief in Mother Jones Magazine, and also Eugene Robinson is a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the Washington Post. Both are, of course, familiar and prized MSNBC political analysts. Let's watch more of Senator Paul, who was performing pro bono eye surgeries in Guatemala when NBC's Chris Jansen interviewed him. Let's listen to Senator Paul.
I think the American public is coming more and more to where I am, and that those people like Hillary Clinton, who she fought her own war, Hillary's war, you know, people are going to find that, and I think that's what scares the Democrats the most, is that in a general election, were I to run, there's going to be a lot of independents and even some Democrats who say, you know what, we are tired of war. We're worried that Hillary Clinton will get us involved in another Middle Eastern war because she's so gung-ho.
You know, sometimes I hear this fellow, David and Gene, and I go, wait a minute, that's me talking. And I know we disagree on so many domestic issues, but war has always been that, and voter suppression are the 2 biggest problems I have with the right, the way they try to keep minorities from voting and the way they get us into war so irresponsibly. And then we're stuck in these wars with a country like Iraq broken up all around us. Mr. Corn, you are my ideological soul brother on many of these issues. And I just want to know what you think when you heard Paul there talking, and we're going to show Secretary Clinton as well, but you've heard what she's been saying lately.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think Democrats are scared of Rand Paul as the nominee. I think they'd love him to be the nominee because he, is so extreme in many ways. And I do find it really hard to believe that the Republican establishment will allow him to become the nominee. I find it almost inconceivable. But even that said, Rand Paul, I think, would have a hard time keeping 1/3 of the Republican base, which is the hawkish national security part of the party. So whatever he may pick up or believes he might pick up from independents, he's going to lose a lot of Republicans should he be the nominee. And I think very few real Democrats are going to go rushing into the arms of a guy who wants to destroy government and make abortion illegal just because Hillary talks tough.
Well, let me go back to Gene on that, because, Gene, we know what Hillary's probably going to run and probably going to be the nominee. Put all the probabilities together, she'll probably be the nominee. And she has been very hawkish, I think, always. I've always sensed she was a hawk. I don't know when I first got that sense, but she's certainly talking that way now.
Yeah, she is talking in a hawkish fashion. I think what David said is basically right, except we don't quite know what circumstances are going to look like if these 2 were to be the candidates. How messy is it going to be in Iraq and Syria? How deeply will we already be involved? And if we're involved in a messy conflict, as we seem to be sliding toward, I mean, let's face it, and if Rand Paul is the candidate who's saying, I'm going to end this war, and Hillary Clinton is the candidate who's saying we got to push ahead, that does change the dynamic.
But, David, isn't there a difference, I think there is, between a gut defense of America against a treacherous attack on us, killing that journalist, and this geopolitical ambition to rework the Middle East? I mean, those seem to be different. Maybe one's no smarter than the other, but gut blood wars, like I feel like launching against ISIS right now, as opposed to this grand notion that got us into this huge mess of the last 10, 12 years, which Hillary supported, which is some grand notion of reworking the Middle East to our advantage, which was a terrible idea.
I agree with you. I think that Hillary Clinton has always been a hawk or hawkish. And I think one reason might be that she might make a political calculation that the first woman president to be elected, maybe someone has to be tougher than, be seen as tougher than less tougher. But I don't believe she is a neocon who is out there looking where to start wars. I mean, I think given the set of circumstances as we saw in Libya and as we saw in Iraq in 2002, her preference might be to support something, but I don't think she's out there actually actively looking to start wars, to fulfill some grand strategic ambition the way the neocons are. But Gene's exactly right in the sense that the circumstances of what's happening in the world will really define what voters want in terms of a hawk or a dove or a little bit of both.
What scares me, Gene, is we all lived through this. You and I lived through it. We're the same age. And I'm telling you, I watched Jack Kennedy become president, and he made some great decisions, like not bringing in air power in the Bay of Pigs, and figuring out how to get us through the Cuban Missile Crisis without a Cold War, without a nuclear war going hot. Because he didn't have to prove his guts, because he had proven that as a young guy in the South Pacific. LBJ gets in there, and he's got to prove his guts. And that's what got us into Vietnam, 500,000 troops for all those years. A guy trying to prove he had the stones to fight that war. I don't want somebody proving they're tough. I don't want a president who gets elected and says, the first thing I got to do is prove I'm tough. That's the road to perdition politically. Look what it set us through. W wanted to be a tough macho cowboy. You know, LBJ wanted to be a Texas cowboy. How about a little less cowboy or cowgirl, if you will, for me? I'd rather be Angela Merkel or somebody if you want to be a woman leader who knows how to, how to put it together without a war. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and she's a tough leader too. I mean, Hillary Clinton has been Secretary of State. She has shown herself on the international stage. I think that question of having to appear tough is more an issue for the campaign than it is for if she were to become president. I'm not sure that she would, feel that she had to demonstrate something about her own firmness just for that sake. But I think her instinct is fairly hawkish. I mean, as she looks at the Middle East and as she looks at the projection of U.S. power.
It's an interesting moment now because there's a lot of chaos overseas that has Americans, I think, pretty worked up or at least upset or concerned, and they're looking towards Obama. I think what they really want is for a president to take care of it. They don't want a war. I think they're tired of war, but at the same time, they don't want the chaos. So it really leaves open for a very skilled politician to figure out how to deal with a public that wants a leader that will deal with this, but without bringing us into a quagmire of a war. It's not a very easy calculation, and I'm not sure Rand Paul has any better sense of how to deal with this politically than anybody else.
What I'd like to see is us to remind the Egyptian military that we're paying most of their bills. The Saudi Air Force, we're giving them most of the equipment and firepower. The same with Jordan. All those Sunni countries over there.
And of course Israel too.
Yes, and say, why don't you guys get together and lead your Air Force in the attack on ISIS? Why do we have to do it from over here? You guys don't like ISIS. Show it. Anyway, contrast between Clinton and Paul on their approach to foreign policy are sometimes stark. In her new book, Hard Choices, Secretary Clinton includes a memo to President Obama about Russian President Vladimir Putin, in which she writes, quote, don't appear too eager to work together. Don't flatter Putin with high-level attention. Decline his invitation for a presidential-level summit in Moscow in September. Contrast that give-no-quarter approach to Rand Paul's comments to the Washington Post about dealing with Putin. Let's listen to Senator Paul.
Some on our side are so stuck in the Cold War era that they want to tweak Russia all the time, and I don't think that's a good idea.
Gene?
Well, yeah, well, the question of how to deal with Putin, when Hillary Clinton's book was written, when Rand Paul was speaking, we seem to have gotten past that, and so Putin has entered a new phase in his relationship with the West and with the United States, and no president is going to be sitting down and having a friendly tea with him anytime soon. But it does say something about the instincts of the two people.
Yeah, let's take a look at the latest polling on this. We've got an NBC Wall Street Journal number here that shows that 9% of the country want us to be more active in our foreign policy and 47% less. I think that's pretty clear, David Corn, that the people that want to go off and yell Geronimo are few in number.
There is no support out there for the John McCain, Lindsey Grahams of the world, who basically want to turn to war, whether it's in Syria, Iraq, as soon as you can, as fast as you can, whenever you can. There's certainly not that. But at the same time, we see Obama's numbers have gone down a bit with the rise of these international conflicts, Syria and Iraq and elsewhere, because I do think Americans expect their president to deal with stuff overseas, whether they can or they can't. So what I think they'd like to see is a leader who comes across as tough, maybe even hawkish in rhetoric, but who doesn't bring us into war and finds another way of dealing with the situation. And that's that's really what's damnably hard in these particular circumstances, and could be even harder in 2016.
But talk loudly and carry a little stick? Is that what you mean? Anyway, Gene, you and I are the same age again. I just remember that great character in Arsenic and Old Lace, the old Teddy Roosevelt character, charging down the stairs, you know, like he's charging up San Juan Hill. That reminds me of Lindsey Graham. And, of course, John McCain lately. Anyway, great men, but they're getting a little wacky sometimes. Anyway, thank you, David Corn, and thank you, Gene Robinson.